I'm very pleased to introduce to you a person I admire quite a bit, Layman Pascal, who once told me he was a guru, but I'm not sure if I believe him, but I know for certain that he's a poet. That's one thing I'm quite certain of. Um, so how I usually start these poetry salons is I read something of poetry that makes me think of the person who is about to read, or I just pick a poem randomly to connect us with the lineage of poets. I'm going to read something from Gurdjieff. It's called Hymn to Our Endlessness. It's actually more of a hymn than a poem, but everything Gurdjieff does is poetry as well. So, thou long patient creator of all that breathes, thou abundantly loving cause of all that exists, thou unique vanquisher of the merciless hero pass, now to the sounds of our glorifying, only rejoice and abide in beatitude. By thy unprecedented labors, thou hast given us the beginning of our arisings. By thy vanquishing of the hero pass, we have attained the possibility of perfecting ourselves to the sacred enclad. And now only rest as merited, and we, in gratitude, will maintain all that thou hast created, and always and in all things will extol thee forever, extol thee, maker creator, thou the beginning of all ends, thou proceeding from infinity, thou having the end of all things within thyself, thou art endlessness. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Layman, who is also the author of this wonderful book called Gurdjieff for a Time Between Worlds, and creator of many courses at Parallax and all kinds of cool shit. So please take us away, Layman. By the way, this is a 20-minute presentation approximately. You can go over a bit. Then we have a little discussion, and then we have open mic if somebody wants to read some poetry.
Okay, I wrestled up a bunch of fragments of poems from different periods of my life, and I thought I would weave it together with a kind of autobiography of my relationship to poetry and language. So, in the beginning, there was no beginning, but soon that would all change. Eventually, everything started with a big bang, as far as our vicious human cognition was concerned. And as far as I can recognize and speak truly about the microstructures of my own best states, the truly primal condition is whatever not quite and almost have in common. A proximal field-like gradient of elastic and generative relationality. The metaphysics of adjacency is decentered practical non-duality, which enables existential development as numinous excess coherence through integrative surplus tactics, in which the separator is the connector. But you've all heard me say things like that before. What you might not have heard me say is the story of poetry. There once was a childish poet who read Lewis Carroll and showed it. He had a limerick's pen until he was 10 and got fed up enough to forego it. That was me. As a wee child, I was a compulsive composer of absurdist rhymes and light-hearted limericks in the English style, like Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll. And this pattern persisted until some of my poems were praised by a professional poet, which predictably led me to lose respect for all poets. Later in high school, I was already a committed surrealist, fishing for fragments of irrational perfection in the subconscious, and I ran into the Hemingway of it all, into the late 20th century pop culture typewriter cult and marketing attitude of scholastic poetry, indoctrination into the postmodern cult of self-expression rather than structural capacity, put your feelings into images and render them in the least number of words. Yuck! The ideology of all my language arts teachers filled me with such disgust I turned to Coleridge, to sonnets, to cavalier odes, to metaphysical musings and flagrant manifestos. I felt like poetry should be anti-modern, anti-narcissistic, excessive, verbose, rhythmic, elaborately, even secretly structured. I learned to unchain words at the edge of comprehension and let those horses roam around while I was working out my adolescent rage in a pluralistic Kali Yuga culture on the edge of gibberish. As I groped my way toward my own occult secrets in and out of various sects and philosophies, always leaving by the same door I came in, I kept kicking the poetry can around with only half-hearted enthusiasm. And then there was Yeats. My God, there was Yeats. The wind is old and still at play, but I must hurry upon my way, for I am running to paradise, he wrote. I loved Yeats, but what did that really mean? That I loved a few excellent lines and a few poems by a few people? What percentage of poetry is that? Less than 1%, I bet. Statistically, I had to admit that as much as I loved some of it, I hated most of it. In general, I hated poetry. So I broke it off with my wine-drinking poet friends of esoteric youth, but by then I had volumes of this shit that had crystallized the experimental and sense-making patterns that had arisen and arisen and arisen spontaneously in me as the voices of the affects I was trying to outrun. A menacing army of lizard men is actually kind of hilarious. Is outwardly mine to be scaring us, inward the times many one of us, much more many more of each one of us. That's the kind of thing the elves were whispering to me. Friends, prajna is samadhi and samadhi is prajna, and this is because they are so very different. Dian Chan Zen, Dian Chan Zen. And run, get a basket of hatchets, batten down those hatches. We thought we had them beaten, now they're breeding in batches. These frickin' creatures, fucking crazy as batshit, landed late last night, laid eggs in the back shed, hatched, ate the cat, then gobbled two fat chicks, chewed right through some dude in a flash, yeah, then ate the arms off a local army detachment. This kind of language was where I thought my authenticity intersected with the anima mundi and the geist of the Zeit. We ceasingly orthels, I wrote, trying to love James Joyce the way I thought my fathers had. Given time, I counterfeit money, a dollar and I, left alone too long to be trusted, mating in silent multiples when no one is watching. Creatures like Dollar and I survive in secretive places. And how many other notes from Marcel Duchamp's writings were folded in secret jokes in everything I wrote. You may find me backwashed in the already absolute, as uncovered as likely as vanished in my wild groping after uninterred perfections, the scarlet hints of which I found in emblems of twisted burlash in every charnel yard from here to the pure gray obscenities of the Ganges and back. Really, I couldn't or didn't want to tell where language left off and a new cosmology began. The word Big Bang is not a prey. The nipple turns to ash upon my lips, 6 billion maps bent back again. An earth choked tight in crinkled trash. There is no sack of facts that equals proof that hole is deep, and we'll all bleed into that pit until we're pale. The word Big Bang has had its day, and on my lips the nipple turns to ash. We must unkiss to find the myth again, for there is none. There is no love Big Bang, it's crude, a word abused. With lovers' loveless lips today in plainless ugly weeps, we burned that cross and tore it down, you dig? We only kept the nails. We only kept the nails, and the nipple turns to ash upon my lips. But the most serious thing for me was trying to find the vibe in which I could thrive in the dark eon without sacrificing any of myself, except maybe for the all of myself. And now an apology from the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Fuck the public, man, I said. And I said the man part to prove I could relate to everyone, but the fact that I had to add it proves I can't. And the fuck the public part was even more obscure because what I meant by that was just the irony of the fact, because in fact I do not feel that way at all. Sadly, this was lost on the crowd, but happily though, it flattered my sense of myself as obscure and maybe even obscene. At that point, it occurred to me to flash my penis and testicles in triumph, the very cock and balls with which I absolutely was not going to fuck the public. I like to make knots very clear, you see, to demonstrate my theorem that they do not exist and therefore cannot be untied. So there I was, you see, obscured and all, my eager, complicated fingers creeping toward my hapless crotch when the crowd roared out, "Yeah, man, fuck the public." "That's right, fuck the public, man," they cried, and I became aghast. A horrible twist of fate that complicated my complexity and delicate maneuvering. Those bastards actually wanted this. In hindsight, I was probably short-sighted to be plying this speech during my address to the Chamber of Commerce, for without even exhibiting my genitals, I could tell that to a man they'd worn their unironic ties. It was a fashion nightmare, and I panicked. I admitted I'm not good at social functions. I'd had a few drinks to calm my nerves, which they did not do. And against my will, somehow, I was elected to be their leader, and it's all a little fuzzy, and in hindsight, I feel awful about it, but that was 10 years ago tonight, and I never bothered to resign, due to my theorem about knots, with which you are doubtless familiar. You see, I really nailed the fuck the public part, but I never quite got the man, I said. I never quite got the man. So that's the kind of stuff I was writing in my mid-20s, along with Dadaist sound poems and sonnets about horror movies and endless attempts to see more deeply into the granularity of my own responses, because the utility of poetry for self-development is to objectify things that would otherwise be subjective so you can grow past them, as long as you're also doing your spiritual exercises every day and at the same time trying to unlearn the root existential move that constantly creates the limited self. I really wanted to be transformed, not merely to capture the authenticity of myself in a way that reminded other people of poetry. So I didn't do another poem for 10 years after that until I finally had the beginning of a new mind and a new name and a new community. And at that point, what poetry meant to me was Nietzsche, was Rumi, Hafiz, Hakuin, and Dogen in the blues, and hyperlinguistic bubbling over of experiential bliss and Dionysian divinity, and the wild articulations of the results of Zen koan work. When you've got something like too much love, you need to put it somewhere. And when you live out classic truths and see how wonderful it would be to say them differently again, when you want to take a stand on the slash mark between non and dual, well, that's where I finally died. And here's what I was writing when that new person in me started going. I went to the so-called first of my integral and meta conferences in 2015. I came back and wrote something called I Am the One of These, which goes a little bit like this. Post-conference, that is post-trans conference, and I insists you let me be debrief. All these trans folk have convened in subliminal, luminous convivium beyond convention. Each gene and every gender of our minds reversing up and up both ways and sung along the lightish lines of all these living nexus and complexes, unseen axis lines with every birth unearthed and strung along the wilding ways of tenderness beyond our signs and strummed along in deeply reveled night. We had every birth unearthed, unquote, but did we have success? Oh, tell my please, oh, can we has success? Well, I can say that I would speak for years on those crayon-colored maps and maze-like language ladders, and they might really matter, but now I'm one of these. Better at love for having gone, oh, tell me please, is that success? Now I am the one of these. We are surrounded by the self-observing collective detective, inspected as Mr. Intersubjective 2015, 2015 years since 2 or 3 of you gathered in my name, so here I am. 2015 mysterious, intersubjective, pink and coiling golden fragrances, projected buffet style across golden plates and coiling glasses, heaped up by our rabble upon our tabla rasas. A ruse is a ruse is a ruse, of course, and it is a rasa, and we are forced to forgive a bald and ancient trickster god for dangling a flashing lure of seriously complete and incomplete theory as the bait to convene this fouled parliament of holes. Thank God post-metaphysics is so far from soulless, for I have one of thoseness as you do too. I want to be and also am so happy to see only this everyone. May it be messed and unreasonable joy unjustified is so hilarious it makes you even happier to have no cause. Hilaritas means I can no longer ask if I am just projecting or if I am one of these. By this means hilaritas the meta-Greeks did once begin to recognize their gods, for re is just meta abetted by para once there's a twist thrown in. As Heidegger said, we soon will be dead and unreasonably happy again. The strange loop of bliss is quite effortless as long as you try really hard, so bow down, be low, and rise up, go out to convivial yards and run rampant just to show them your love. You are the perichoresis of everyone, and I am the one of these. We soon will be dead, though soon is still near in several hundred years along regenerate techno-vines of multi-quadrant telomeres, but nevertheless we will be dead. In the wine-drenched sun of Happy Valley they will pour water on the poem A Granite Tree for thee and me, so say we all, I am the one of these. And around that time I would sit in the snow unmoving for hours and try to make poetic points about koan contemplation. This one's called Bad Emptiness. Zen, I say, gets it exactly wrong. Fuzzy logic funneled into a laser's brain to burn a smoldering hole down on the right. Slip just across that ineffable razor, the dotted line describes the vanishing point from form to emptiness. Versing your vice and back again will fail if you agree with it. You will lose that precious pleasure if you think form is emptiness, I guess. The fact of beyond words is not the secret beyond words. It gestures dimly to a vague distraction sold to the free as freedom. Direct pointing at the nature of mind must be very direct. fact. The nature of mind is not the empty bladder of an infinite sky or a hypothetical backdrop. It is the excruciatingly hypothetical, very, very active, even contrastive. Think more to be thoughtless unless you know the taste of bad emptiness. Then your emptiness will not be empty of itself, which is heresy and hearsay, no. Brothers and sisters, do not let your Zen grow up to be cowboys or be the pressureless freedom of a deflated soccer ball between the motes of ordinary thought. Thinking it goes exact beyond error just by hearing it, by sitting down and letting go. No, no, 'tis flummery. There is no just in extraordinary thinking, which is not something else than non-thinking, except in ordinary thinking, where anything could be true as the devil. But God is the first person you meet heading nonchalantly in that very direction. Now tell me, has that nonchalant one somehow lost that chalance somewhere? And madam, I beg you to tell me, is this the card you chose? So that's 10 years ago now. I was writing that stuff, and I would go back around then again and again to Nietzsche's description of the god Dionysus at the end of Beyond Good and Evil. I felt like that description was something I knew really well, that it was the vibe of the new thinking, the new culture that we were groping towards, that it was the God after the death of God and the Gnostic Christ returning to the forest. Dio of Nisus, I wrote. Wherever the gushing parade of species transcribes itself as upon the great tree, there I am. As long and as longer the horns of the wise are all growthing and branching, there I am. Under within every split you will find me, for I am the deepening in-betweens of all that reaches out. I am the convergence of divergence, the light in the way, saith the Lord seductively. Wherever our halos and holiest crowns are twisted wreaths of luminous greens, there I am, blossoming am. And wherever the physics of chaos flux is utterly wonderfully bifurcating and fulgurating, I am. And you will see my hear of satyr's song beckoning back for just the front of you, and the far of within of all that is splitting and spreading, mixing and blending, turning as it travels on. Together we wash, dissolve, and endlessly make up anew the one, wherever warm meditative thinkers and charming drinkers are welcomed in the single heart embrace. For all convivial and lucid intoxications, there I am. Wherever nuanced, complex, and childish things can join, there I am. I am the upleveling dendrites whose cathedral is all contemplative brains. Anywhere concentration is taught by submission to strange and attractive things, there I am. Wherever divinity is assumed to be, dancing and prancingly chuckled at the ultra-obscure, there I am. Wisdom and virtue are seductions that honor my name. Wherever the serpent and dove waltz together in wide-open streets, there I am. Where imperial road builders and weeds have become good friends at last, there I am. My liquid is mixing freely among well-behaved lords and lavishly rogues, good folks and beggars and nymphs, all cooking in a common party. Wherever your comedy is sly, fast, and delicate, intelligent as your music, holding hands firmly with the sheerest pleasures at the edge of tragedies, wherever such virtues are widely proclaimed, there I am. And if you cannot tell whether your God is joking but are nevertheless miraculously undisturbed, then I totally fucking am that God. When Tantra proliferates across cultural landscapes in diverse and dubious combinations, whether faithful or improvised, there I am. And if you lift the multicolored vines that evocatively entwines our clockwork cosmic orbs in all their rushing swarms and cool gyrations, then I am there. My rhythms are tethered sideways in the benign and cosmic apocalypse of faint and distant stars, driven forward as my children rise on the uplifting wings of uncannied angels whose trumpets are bioelectronic and particularly smooth, for I am green Jesus, whose crucifixion wood is covered again in incandescent moss, bursting thickly with vibrant new shoots of cahoots, here I am. And then Thomas repeated the whole damn thing. A lot of what concerned me was something I thought was exquisitely expressed in the Sufi dictum that you break your heart longing for the beloved divine because it is non-separate from you. The difference between the shape of being there and the shape of being on the way is the shape of the same difference. So I wrote things like Halfway to God. Ladies and gentlemen, our show tonight at the famous Janus Theater will end with a lengthy intermission. There is no second half, but the after party is open to all. There is no second half of a path that intersects a mirror, so here we are, nearer and nearer to the midpoint of a broken bridge. Frozen in place at noon and starting to thaw, indulgence and goodness freshly entangled, starting to glow and obscured in octave furnaces as we get better and better at being halfway. Perched on the steady cusp of becoming in the endlessly dawning already eternal day as foretold, growing our halfway house, halfway of God. So get closer to this far away. That's right, get closer to this far away. And all this poetry of my joyous, weird unity states helped me learn the rhythm and the flavor that I wanted to infuse into my best prose, which this is not. Now, while I was doing all that poetic writing and hating poetry and loving it again, I was also studying unusual forms of communication. Higher stages, esoteric symbolism, hyperlinguistics, and importantly, trance and hypnosis, which a lot of poetry sways in and out of. I was particularly interested in conversational hypnosis, both as a way of getting myself into trances and spotting when people are consciously or unconsciously speaking in ways that are trying to adjust my consciousness. I made a personal study of hypnosis, and it turned out I didn't really want to help people get over their smoking and lose weight. I wanted to open a channel to their subconscious and let it get up and breathe and mosey around a little. And I didn't want people to go into a trance right now. I wanted them to go half into a trance and to come out knowing more about how trance works. I started to do what I called transparent induction with language disguised as poems, which I would sometimes read out in public like I'm doing right now, which is why if you check yourself closely right now, you might already be sort of going into a trance, which is good because your brain likes trances. It likes its favorite flow states. You like to forget whether it's been minutes or years since you've been listening to this, but don't worry, it won't feel like you're starting to go into a trance right now. It feels exactly the way you feel right now, which is fine. Conversational induction, which is the use of language to renormalize the relation of the left and right hemispheres, uses three basic principles. It uses physiological imagination, unspecified significance, and proto-logic. Of all three of these, the most interesting for non-standard poet-like language use, which is what poetry is this business about unspecified significance. The simplest way to do it, which is the way Osho did, is simply to tell people the most important secret of meditation is to always, because your attention focuses there to a vanishing point. You start to have a primitive relationship with the abstract something. And isn't there something in your mind, something more than you, something that if you could access it more directly, you would know exactly what you need to know about the most important things in your life? That power is within you somewhere. And there is a very important part of yourself that already knows exactly how to access that special power if you become willing to make the necessary choice right now to unlock that very personal knowledge that you need in order to become the most authentic version of what you already want to be in your life right now. Because I know that you already have everything you need to make an important change by focusing your attention completely on that special spot inside your mind right now where your awareness comes from. Regardless of what I'm saying, you know that you have in yourself a capacity that is more important than anything else that anyone says to you, because it is the only and the best way for the thing that you really are underneath to do what it has come here to do in this life, which I think we can agree is your life, right? So you have to be and get to be the one, or maybe the two, or the three, and maybe it's still 1 o'clock. It's up to you, because you are the only one who knows what's going on in the center at the back of your mind, which is where all of our awareness comes from. And if you can hold your attention completely at that exact spot for a moment, you will discover a power and a way of changing everything that very few people have ever had access to. Because as crazy as it sounds, the secret of everything I'm saying is really just for you. And I think part of you already knows what that means, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But because you are here, you get to make a very important decision that most people don't even know about. And if you actually want to make that important change in your life, as I know you are capable of doing, then it is very obvious that you just need to grab that inner switch, which is located exactly where you yourself left it for you to find again when you most need it, which is right now. Because as strange as this may seem, something in you brought you here today to hear this from me right now, because it is fantastic at knowing exactly what it needs, which is what you need right now in your life, as long as your normal habits of attention don't get in the way. And the way to help you really do that most effectively right now is by actually making that change right now that you know how to make, but making sure to focus on doing that in a very special way, which is definitely not poetry.
Welcome to Parallax, the resurrection of truth, beauty, and goodness. Parallax, a media war engine. Parallax, the construction amidst eternal decay. Parallax, the portal to the edge of chaos. Parallax, poem and provocation. Parallax, mad philosophers and tantric demigods. Parallax, totem for an unknown god. Parallax, philosophy, and the return of the matriarch. Parallax, the end of the meaning crisis. Parallax, the whispering daemon in your ear. Parallax, the god of wisdom, wine and love. Parallax, your home for superior publications, podcasts and courses. Parallax, join us today.